Hi, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology. It's Tuesday, March 17th. Today, I'm making a couple of videos. Hopefully, this will give everyone who's stuck at home a little bit more content and, astrological entertainment value. It's helpful to tune into things that are spiritually uplifting right now. And so I hope that my channel and my content will be that for you and for everyone listening. So uh, I'm making a couple of videos today. One is going to be I'm catching up with planets in profile series. So I'll be doing Mars and Capricorn a little later today. In this video, I'm going to take a look at a concept from ancient astrology that personally really changed my understanding and view of the chart and how I read and interpret charts. Um, Before I dive into that, I have a chart that I'm going to show you from a client. We're going to call her client R. She was nice enough to let me share her chart and her story with you today. But in the meantime, I want to remind everyone for the next couple of months, I'm promoting my upcoming programs. I have a 1-year course in Hellenistic astrology, optional certification at the end if you want, a 2nd-year course, advanced course, and a horary course. They're all 1-year long programs. They're more immersive, in-depth, intensive programs for people who are really looking to develop a solid foundational knowledge of astrology or the ability to interpret birth charts. That class, the next one, if you're brand new and you're looking for a starting place, would be my year 1 class called Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. And that class starts in June on Sundays. You can check it out on the courses page of my website, nightlightastrology.com, or email me if you have questions, info@nightlightastrology.com. I also want to mention that I offer need-based tuition. I know that some people are really hurting or are going to be hurting because of the amount of places that are closing down and the kind of social isolation that's happening. Fortunately for me, when things are really stressful and uncertain, when the future is really uncertain, a lot more business tends to come in for astrologers. It's just a weird thing about being an astrologer, right? Uh, but at the same time, I understand, and it's nice that I can teach online, like that my work is basically online. So I have, I can work from home, which is nice. Uh, I think we're actually, by the way, as a side note, I think we're finding out that a lot of jobs can work from home. I've just been talking to a lot of my friends and they're like, I could be working home at all. I could have been doing this all along, but at any rate, I know a lot of people can't and don't have that privilege to be able to work from home right now. And a lot of people might not be able to sign up for my course. I offer it every 6 months. So it'll be back around in the fall and hopefully things will be back to sane soon. But if your budget is being pinched and you still want to take the class, I have a need-based tuition that I usually offer for single parents, people who are only part-time employed, people who are really low income or on disability, or veterans, or people who are retired and on a fixed income, or experiencing financial crisis. Um, this certainly qualifies as a unique thing. I've never had to add the coronavirus to my list of need-based tuition, but I've been doing this for 10 years, and one of the things I'm most passionate about, as you probably all know, is providing high quality, either free or really affordable astrological education to people. So, if you're being affected by this, you want to take a course, or you were planning on taking a course, but this is hitting your budget in a really difficult way, please feel free to check out the need-based tuition option that I have on my website. I think probably over half of my students every year are on some form of need-based tuition. And I don't think that people should be priced out of astrological education, especially during a time when maybe we're stuck at home and maybe doing something like this could be really, really uplifting. So if that fits your description, regardless of what your situation is, if the coronavirus is affecting you, please feel free to reach out in that way. And hopefully by June, things will be better. I kind of have a feeling that once Jupiter separates from Pluto, things will at least temporarily get better. Maybe it comes back in the fall a little bit. But anyway, all that being said, again, if you want to check out all the info of my courses at nightlightastrology.com. All right, so today's topic is the chart as a moving image. The chart as a moving image. Now, in this person's chart, I'm just going to illustrate a very simple concept, and that is the concept of a planet changing signs and its dignity or its accidental situation changing by virtue of it changing signs. So this is a student of astrology who's looking at her chart going like, where do you see the crazy chronic health problems that I've had? Starting in 2011, when she was, I think, 14 going on 15, this individual, we'll call her client R, she developed ulcerative colitis. And then by 2014, 2015, she was having multiple surgeries to remove parts of her colon or the whole colon or something like that. Then in 2018, she had another really acute episode. And then just recently, this month in March, she had another acute episode that hospitalized her, almost killed her. So she's like, where do we see this crazy signature of health in my chart? Now, she's a student of Hellenistic astrology. So I, I, if you know much about Hellenistic astrology, you look at a chart like this and you go, yeah, I don't see where the really rough health signification is. So let me try to explain some of the different ways we might look for a rough health signification. The traditional signifiers of health are going to be related to the first house, planets in the first house, the ruler of the first house, or the moon, typically. People sometimes think the sixth house is the house of health. It's not. It's the house of disease. So is the 12th. The first house is going to be the house of health and vitality. So your health is related to the sixth and the 12th houses, but typically in the negative, or surgeries or medicines or treatments or something like that, or the health fields, the health occupations. Um, anyway, in this individual's chart, the moon is in the eighth house. You can see the moon right here in Taurus in the eighth house, and that could be considered somewhat rough, but it's an exalted moon. And, it's not, the thing about this moon is that, like, it's not 8, 9 times out of 10. If I see an exalted moon in the eighth house, I'm not sitting there and going, you're going to have life-threatening illnesses, from the time you're like, 14, 15 up to 23, 24, 10 years of your life, just, really major procedure after procedure. Typically in a birth chart, for something like that, we need to see something a little bit more severe, because like I said, how else do you differentiate the moon in the eighth house from 7, 8, 9 out of 10 other moons in the eighth house that don't pertain to like really life-threatening disease, right? So typically we want to see multiple factors indicating potential for great harm or challenge or conflict around health, or we want to see one that's undeniably sort of brutal, in the classic language, at least to see the something to the degree that this individual has experienced. Here's how we get it in this chart, and it's not always obvious. And the reason that it's not obvious is because we tend to read birth charts in a static manner, which means we look at them as they are, and we say what was happening right at the moment of birth, and that's it. That's all the information we need. But no, in ancient astrology, like horary astrology and in other forms of ancient astrology, the continued movements of the planet after birth, as well implied in the birth chart, as well as those that happened prior to birth, are incredibly important. In this case, for example, here is what we see. We see Venus, the ruler of Libra, the first house, therefore the planet that represents vitality, is just, it looks fine, right? It's like, oh, it's in Gemini in the ninth house. Nothing's really afflicting it. But what's going to happen is it's at 2930, which means it's just about to enter Cancer, where it will immediately enter into a malefic enclosure. And it will be hit by, immediately, it goes right into square with Saturn and then conjunction with Mars. This isn't just any Saturn and Mars either. This is Saturn retrograde with the South Node in Aries, and it's fall and angular, strong and difficult. And this is Mars really badly debilitated in its fall, but strong, angular. So we have two powerful but very badly debilitated malefics, especially Mars, because this is a daytime chart. And in ancient astrology, Mars in a daytime chart was particularly nasty. Okay, now, the other thing that we have to consider here is that the moon, one of the natural significators of health, is ruled by Venus, which means that the moon as the signifier of health will then be hosted by an entrapped or enclosed Venus just as soon as Venus changes signs. So this is also a symbol, you might say, of the way in which a health problem is going to emerge. It's really difficult, but one of the reasons you may not see it in a chart is because we're not looking past the immediacy of the moment of birth. Instead, we're staying stuck there. And what we want to do is see imminent changes that are coming. So this is a sign change, which indicates some kind of shift in what's happening with her health, because Venus is the ruler of her health, among other things. And then as soon as it changes signs, you could say the moon's dispositor as well is going to immediately be beholden to that Venus, who is then entrapped by Saturn and Mars. So that's something that ancient astrology teaches us. And it's these kinds of theories, it's these kinds of techniques and maneuvers that will make you, go from sort of basic interpretive things that you can say, usually about someone's character, psychology, or behavior, to specific things that you can say about their karma and their fate. Ancient astrology is generally more predictive. It's more of a karmic science. When paired with the psychological tools of modern astrology, we can say things about people and who they are, have fun with it, understand ourselves and our own behavior and disposition psychologically a bit more. And we need to be able to do the really important basic work of saying karmically what's going to happen. So this is a chart that has a very difficult health, a depiction of a very difficult health situation that will unfold, but we don't get there unless we know how to advance planets symbolically and what sign changes mean when they're in the process of happening in a birth chart and things like that. Hopefully you were able to follow that. Now, let me show you something really, really basic to follow this up. And that is that we are going to now just take a look at her progressed chart. Now, in the progressed chart, which I'll show you on the screen here, in the progressed chart, we have a way of tracking the symbolic development of those movements of the planets that happen after birth. I won't go into progressions very deeply, but the basic formula is that we look at 1 day after the birth as 1 year after the birth, 2 days after the birth as 2 years after the birth. That is to say, 2 days after R was born, where were the planets? That's where they will symbolically progress to at 2 years old. 3 days after the birth, 3 years old. That's the gist. So where was Venus, when she was 14 or 15? Where was Venus at 18? Where is Venus now as she's had the most recent attack with her colon and her digestive tract, requiring an emergency surgery again, very, very recently in 2020, right? So we can use this to help. Well, one of the things that we see here, and I'm just going to point this out very briefly rather than going into it, sort of a full analysis, which might get too kind of complicated, is here we see Venus applying to the conjunction with Mars. It's within 3 degrees, and since 2018 has been moving into the 3 degrees when she's had 2 very subsequent acute attacks since the removal of her colon back in like 2014 and 15. There's also a couple of really interesting things that happen that you can track out. Oftentimes, it'll be a combination of things. So let me just show you how this works. So if we go backward in time to the moments that were really acute in her life, when she first developed ulcerative colitis in 2011, the progressed moon was in its fall in Mars's sign. Let's draw a little circle around that. It's a little thicker there. And then the moon in its fall in her progressed ascendant, which is the health house, really difficult place for the moon, which represents the body and health, was in Mars's sign, in its fall in Mars's sign, transferring the light of Venus to Mars. That was when she was diagnosed, right? Then if we bring it up to 2018, or 2015, when she was having the major surgeries to initially remove the colon, we see that the moon is in Saturn's sign. Remember the other malefic that Saturn was running into in the picture. And here's the moon in Saturn's sign in its stability, in its detriment. Again, the moon representing health and body, along with the ascendant ruler. In the natal chart, we're tracking the ascendant ruler in the natal chart, and we're tracking the moon to see about health. The moon is in Saturn's sign, hits the square to Saturn, and then opposes Venus and opposes Mars. And that's the year that she has her surgeries to remove the colon. Now, if you pull it up to 2018, when she has the next series of events that happen, some more real difficulties, she ends up having to get, I think, another surgery for, if I remember correctly. Now we have the really intense signature that in some ways is the most difficult, and that is that Venus is actually pulling into the engagement zone with Mars, which is within 3 degrees. So now Venus, their health house ruler, is actually symbolically progressing into the conjunction with that malefic Mars, and that's when things really start to heat up. And you can see, by the way, at the same time, there's the moon in Saturn's sign still. So now then we progress up to 2020. Just recently, she's had another acute attack that she almost died from, had to be hospitalized with. And you can see that the moon is right on the cusp, is in an engagement within, or application with 7 to about 8 degrees with Saturn, and is just about to cross over the sign boundary into a conjunction with Saturn, right? So every time we're tracking that moon and we're tracking that Venus by progression, and we're seeing that as the moon makes these hard aspects and as Venus pulls into the difficult relationship closer and closer with Mars, that things are amping up, ramping up in her life with this health condition. So that's how secondary progressions can be really helpful. Now, let me show you one last thing in terms of what we can say sort of predictively going forward. So the final thing that we have to look at is, of course, her current astrological transits and what's coming. So that progressed Venus is going to conjoin her progressed fallen Mars in about the beginning of 2024. And what we want to do is take a look at that, because that's the really rough moment. And frankly, we just want to, you never want to scare anyone, but you want to say, hey, look, you've had really difficult health signature. The actual conjunction symbolically of Venus with Mars is set to come in about 2024, when you're about 28 years old, which is also about on the brink of your Saturn return. In this case, that's a lot. That's a lot to deal with. Let's see what's going on in her chart transit-wise at the same time. Let me adjust this. All right, so here, if we go forward to about the beginning of 2024, here's what we're going to see. Oops, I apologize. I have the wrong chart up. Let me fix that really quick. So when we go forward to 2024, the super kind of unfortunate thing about this, let's see if I've got this now. No, sorry guys, hold on just a second and pause this and I'll get it right. Okay, here we go. So now we're going to take a look at her transits coming up to her natal chart. I'm sorry, I couldn't get the right chart on the screen. There we go. Now, if we go to 2024, which is symbolically when her progressed Venus hits that really difficult Mars in Cancer in her chart, again, just so that you can see exactly what I'm talking about, let's highlight it. So here is Venus symbolically progressing toward that Mars when she's born. What we're trying to track out is about when that could happen. And if we use progressions, it happens about early 2024. It's already in the engagement period. What's within 3 degrees, right as it enters that period, 2018 to about right now, we see a couple more acute attacks. So that's the Mars, and they require surgery, the cutting of Mars. And what we want to do is take this forward and say, okay, well, what's going to happen in 2024 when we hit that really important moment in about February of 2024, which is when they're coming together. And at that time, what do we see? Well, we see Uranus, right? Right there, we see Uranus over the moon. So you can see it, I'll just point it out in case it's not obvious. There's Uranus hitting the moon, which is another one of the health house signifiers. She's coming toward the Saturn return. Saturn's moving, starting to get toward the Saturn return up here as well. But Saturn in the meantime is in the 6th house of her chart, which is also a place where we're often dealing with, chronic health issues, unfortunately. So we can also see right about this same time in early February of 2024 that Mars is going to oppose the Sun in her chart. We can also see that at that time she's also getting eclipses in her 1st house of health, and South Node eclipses in particular. So this, in terms of a client sitting down and going, look, I've been dealing with this all the time. I don't see it in my birth chart. Where is it? They're a student of astrology. There it is, because we need to track the change of Venus, the imminent change of Venus and the engagement, malefic engagement, enclosure that was happening right after birth. Then what we do is we project forward and they say, okay, well, can you see if this is going to get worse? Is it going to get better? I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychic. I'm not a clairvoyant. I just read the transits, right? And I read the patterns. This would suggest some kind of cathartic. The nice thing, cathartic event, maybe of another surgery, maybe some kind of deeper, more transformative treatment of some kind. It could represent another acute health event. The one thing that's kind of encouraging is that while Uranus on the moon can be rough for health, it can also signify liberation. The most positive interpretation of this situation, that she's moving toward by 2024 would be the potential for some kind of liberating event around her health. But usually the liberating event, especially with eclipses in the first house and everything that we're seeing collectively, would come by kind of getting to the end of your rope with it, being like, okay, you either hit the darkest moment or the most difficult phase, or there's finally some kind of breakthrough treatment or alternative form of treatment that you try that starts working. So it could be a real catharsis. It could be very positive. But if, again, my client, I'm saying, look, just really take care of yourself. Um, things might ramp up a bit around 2024. Just be really good to yourself, be really aware, be vigilant, do everything you need to do, take it seriously. I'm sure they already are, or they don't need me to tell them that. But we have to be able to deliver the karmic weather, the karmic news accurately without scaring people. So we want to find some way of being like, look, here's what you've been dealing with. Here's how we see it in the chart. Here's what's happening going forward, maybe the next like sort of intense moment or acute moment. The nice thing is that after Venus separates from Mars, by progression, one would think that the potential for the condition or of karma that we're looking at to pass would be there. And we do see Uranus on the moon at that time, which can signify liberation. But again, as you all know, sometimes liberation comes through the difficult, a difficult catharsis. It's like, yeah, I'm going to be liberated from bad boyfriend karma, but first I got to go through a breakup. Yeah, I'm going to be liberated from bad job karma, but first I have to lose my job. So sometimes Uranus will disrupt the status quo when it comes to health and give us a health crisis or a health challenge, but then provide us with some form of liberation or breakthrough. So I'm optimistic for client R, and I really want to thank her for sharing this chart with us today. And we're all sending you the best. I can't imagine how difficult it would be to be going through an acute health problem right now as the world is sort of shut down and everyone's freaked out of being in public or in hospitals, basically, because we don't want to contract. You don't want to contract the flu on top of dealing with an emergency surgery for your colon and stuff like that. So just let's send R a lot of love and a lot of courage for continuing to handle this challenging health dynamic in her life. In the meantime, I want to remind all of you that a chart is a moving image. And by understanding the moving dynamics of the sky and all of the sophisticated, subtle ways that astrologers would read the dynamics of a birth chart, not statically, but in terms of the implied past, the implied present, and the implied immediate future of the movements of the planets, we just get a much more rich, sophisticated kind of astrology. Again, shameless self-promotion. My course is coming up. If you like this kind of stuff and you want to go deeper with it, if it fascinates you like it fascinates me, it's like sitting before the Sphinx, and really riddling with these very deep esoteric principles when we study ancient astrology. And if you're someone who's into astrology, you've always been looking for a more structured, grounded way of learning about it, complete with a more focused spiritual philosophy. I like to think that that's the strong point of my program, but you can check it out for yourself. If you have any questions, again, let me know. info@nightlightastrology.com or nightlightastrology.com, and hit up the courses page. I hope you are all taking care of each other and that this example was interesting for you. Leave your comments in the comments section below. What are some of the interesting things that you've learned about your chart? What are some of the interesting signatures in your chart? Maybe some of the difficult ones that you've had to deal with. How do you recommend other people deal with difficult things that they find in their birth chart? It's always interesting to see everyone share their advice and thoughts together. Now stay tuned because, like I said, I'm going to try to create some more content. I should have a Mars and profile video coming out soon. Okay, take care everyone.